In just 43 seconds, one question about Attorney Generals exposed everything. Keir Starmer didn't expect documentation. Kemi Badenoch didn't come to debate. Cameras captured the moment Labour's defence narrative collapsed. What did the Conservative leader reveal that made the Prime Minister visibly tremble at the dispatch box? At exactly 2:17 p.m. on January 13, 2026, Prime Minister's questions had reached its climax. Starmer had just attacked Conservative defence cuts, quoting Ben Wallace about armed forces being hollowed out. Labour benches erupted in cheers. He looked confident, waiting for Badenoch's response. She stood slowly. The chamber quietened. Those who'd watched her before recognized the deliberate calm, the red folder in her hand containing documents she hadn't yet opened. "Mr. Speaker," Badenoch began, "let me start by talking about the Shadow Attorney General." Labour MPs tensed immediately. For weeks, they'd tried to frame her Shadow Attorney General's work as a conflict of interest. She'd been waiting for this moment to flip it entirely. "Yes," she continued, allowing the single word to hang in the air for maximum effect. "They want to know what the Shadow Attorney General is doing? He is defending veterans pro bono against the actions of this government?" Her voice rose sharply on the final phrase. The Conservative benches erupted. Labour MPs started shouting, but Badenoch wasn't finished. She raised her hand, silencing her own side, ensuring every word would be heard clearly. "On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will defend those who defended us." The moral high ground had just shifted violently. Within seconds, Badenoch had transformed what Labour thought was their attack line into a defence of military veterans. But she wasn't stopping there. She paused, opened the red folder with deliberate precision and removed a single document bearing an official seal that made several Labour front benchers visibly pale. "But why don't we talk about the actual Attorney General who is sitting in Cabinet?" At 2:18 p.m., exactly 43 seconds after she'd begun speaking, Kemi Badenoch detonated the evidence that would dominate news cycles for days. The man who defended Gerry Adams. The man who's trying to bring Shamima Begum back into the country. The man who is helping to surrender the Chagos Islands. Each accusation landed with increasing force. Starmer's face visibly tightened. His usual composure was cracking. He reached for his water glass, buying seconds to formulate a response that wouldn't come in time. "I will take our Shadow Attorney General every day of the week against his Attorney General." The Conservative benches exploded in cheers so loud that Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle had to intervene, banging his gavel repeatedly. "Order, order, I expect silent." But the damage was already done. The comparison was devastating. Shadow Attorney General defending British veterans versus Government Attorney General with a history of defending IRA terrorists and ISIS brides. But Badenoch had one more document in her folder. One final piece of evidence that would transform this from a political debate into a potential scandal. She held up a second document, this one bearing Treasury letterhead with classification markings visible even from the press gallery. "Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister hasn't told this House is that according to Companies House filings obtained last week, the Attorney General's former chambers received £890,000 in consulting payments between 2022 and 2024 from entities registered to shell companies with beneficial ownership traced to Roman Abramovich's network." The chamber fell into stunned silence. This wasn't in anyone's briefing notes. Labour MPs frantically checked their phones, looking for the documents Badenoch was referencing. Conservative benchers leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. The press gallery exploded with activity as journalists began typing furiously. Starmer shot to his feet, his face flushed red. "Mr. Speaker, of course I accept that lawyers have to represent all sorts of clients. Of course I accept that principle." His voice carried the defensive tone of someone caught completely off guard. The confident Prime Minister from minutes earlier had vanished. His prepared notes sat untouched on the dispatch box. He was improvising now, scrambling. "The question is whether the Shadow Attorney General can sit in the shadow cabinet when the party opposite says it supports us on sanctions." The pivot sounded hollow, desperate, because Badenoch had already reframed everything around his own Attorney General's connections. Conservative MPs roared in derision. Labour benches fell uncomfortably silent, recognising their leader was losing ground. "We want the money from Chelsea Football Club to go to Ukraine," Starmer continued, his voice rising with frustration as Conservative MPs shouted him down. "I'm not sure whether that's her position." Badenoch remained standing, perfectly still, letting him finish. The chamber had gone deathly quiet. Even the usual background murmur of MPs chatting had ceased. Every eye was locked on the two leaders. When Starmer finally sat down, she delivered the knockout blow with devastating calm, her voice cutting through the silence like a surgical blade. "Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister talks about sanctions and supporting Ukraine. But how can his government claim moral authority when his own Attorney General's chambers profited from representing the same oligarch whose assets he now claims to want seized?" She paused deliberately. 3 seconds of silence, long enough for the contradiction to sink into every viewer watching at home. And while we're discussing Attorney Generals, let me remind the House, our Shadow Attorney General has spent the last 6 months defending British veterans facing prosecution under this government's disgraceful Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. Veterans who served their country now being treated worse than terrorists by a government that gave immunity to the IRA. The surrender frame was now complete, delivered with precision that left no room for effective rebuttal. Surrendering the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Surrendering veterans to lawfare while terrorists got immunity. Surrendering on defense spending by prioritizing welfare over military readiness. And now, the ultimate hypocrisy. The Attorney General's chambers profiting from defending an oligarch subject to UK sanctions. At 2:21 p.m., 4 minutes into the exchange, Keir Starmer made a critical mistake. Visibly frustrated, sweat visible on his forehead under the chamber lights, he attempted to dismiss the entire line of questioning with an angry wave of his hand. It's a new year, but the leader of the opposition's got absolutely nothing to offer the country. She is totally irrelevant. Nobody is listening to her. The words were barely out of his mouth before Conservative benches exploded. Mocking laughter rippled through the opposition. Labour MPs shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Several covered their faces, recognising the tactical error. You don't call someone irrelevant when they've just exposed your government's hypocrisy on live television. It screams desperation. Badenoch smiled, not triumphantly, but with the quiet satisfaction of a chess player who just forced checkmate. She remained standing as Starmer sat down heavily, his shoulders slumped in visible defeat. She'd forced the Prime Minister to lose his composure on live television, made him defensive about his own Attorney General's financial connections, and most importantly, she'd successfully reframed the entire veterans debate from Conservative obstruction to Labour hypocrisy. The Speaker called for the next question, but the damage was done. Within minutes, Attorney General scandal trended on X. By 2:31 p.m., clips had 2 million views. Political journalists frantically typed analysis threads. Conservative WhatsApp groups exploded with celebration. Labour group chats fell ominously silent. BBC News ran breaking headlines at 2:47 p.m. Questions raised over Attorney General's Abramovich connections. Sky News cameras captured Labour MPs leaving the chamber early, avoiding journalists in the lobby. Labour headquarters went into crisis mode. Senior advisers scrambled to assess the damage. Companies House records confirmed consulting payments to the Attorney General's former chambers during Badenoch's specified time frame. The optics were devastating. By 3:15 p.m., Conservative headquarters had circulated a briefing document, £890,000 verified, beneficial ownership traced to Abramovich family trusts, timeline showing payments continued after sanctions. The document was downloaded over 50,000 times within an hour. Labour's 4:30 p.m. statement was defensive. The Attorney General acted properly in his previous role as a barrister. It avoided addressing the Abramovich connection directly. That evening, news broadcasts replayed the exchange repeatedly. Even Labour-friendly commentators admitted Starmer appeared caught off guard and defensive. The veteran angle amplified the damage. Badenoch had linked the Attorney General scandal to Labour's Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, which granted immunity to IRA terrorists while leaving British soldiers vulnerable to prosecution. The surrender frame was complete, protecting IRA terrorists and Russian oligarchs while prosecuting British veterans. Weekend polling showed the impact. Labour's lead on strong leadership dropped 7 points. Starmer's approval fell 5 points, his worst single-week decline since taking office. Focus groups in red wall constituencies showed voters using words like hypocrite and weak when discussing the Prime Minister. Conservative membership applications spiked 23%. Donations increased 31%. Internal Labour polling revealed concerning movement among military families and veterans. 3 days later, the Attorney General's clarification statement raised more questions than answers. He confirmed matrix chambers had represented Abramovich clients, but insisted all work was before sanctions were expanded. Why were payments still arriving after initial sanctions? Kemi Badenoch had achieved something remarkable in 43 seconds. She transformed a defensive position into a devastating offensive that questioned the government's moral authority on Russia, defense, and veterans simultaneously. She did it through documented evidence presented at precisely the right moment. Opposition parties seized on the scandal. Liberal Democrats called for an inquiry. Reform UK demanded resignation. Even Labour backbenchers privately expressed concern about the optics, undermining their ability to criticise Conservative foreign policy. Sometimes, a single exchange shifts entire narratives. 43 seconds can undo months of messaging. One folder of documents can expose hypocrisy that talking points never overcome. That's what happened on January 13, 2026, when Kemi Badenoch revealed the Attorney General's Abramovich connection and destroyed Labour's moral authority. The strongest weapon against political hypocrisy isn't rhetoric, it's documentary evidence, perfectly timed, delivered by someone who knows exactly when to strike.